Hello. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. So welcome to this evening of Public Talk with Albert Woodfox and Arlene Galloon, and it is hosted by Robin Maynard. I just want to say a quick word, 2 announcements to make. So first of all, well, actually 3 announcements. First of all, I would like to say that we acknowledge that we are unceded land on the island of Teotihuacan, or Munyan, called by the Anishinaabe people, Munyan, and so we are in unceded territory right now, and we acknowledge that. I also wanted to say that tomorrow in Kanisatake, there's a day of cleanup because there's been a big flood over there, and so they need help to help clean up, and so there's a call on Facebook. If you look at it, I think it's written Kanisatake barbecue, so there's going to be a big barbecue, and if anybody has time tomorrow, it would be very nice to help that community who's in a big trouble right now. And the other announcement I wanted to make is also that Albert will not be able to stay after the talk. He has an appointment elsewhere, so he will have to leave quickly after the talk. But there will be a period of question at the end of the talk, so if you want to ask him a question, you'll have the opportunity to do it. So I'll pass it on to Robin. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks to Maddie and Jude and all the organizers of this event. And most especially, I really want to thank Albert Woodfox and Arlene Galloon for being here. And I think I'd like everybody to join me in a welcome. We're really in the presence of brilliant and resilient and incredibly just role models for, I think, for all of us here tonight. And I'd just like everyone to join me in a round of applause to welcome our very special guests. So just to give a bit of a breakdown of how the night is going to déroule, we're going to start off, I'm just going to really briefly introduce the topic, and then because Arlene won't be able to stay as long, she'll be speaking first around her situation, around what she has gone through and the fight that she is undertaking for prison justice in Canada. And following that, we're going to be talking, of course, we're going to be hearing from Albert Woodfox and hearing about his story and his history of resistance. And we'll be doing, I'll be asking some questions, and then there will be time as well for the audience to ask some questions. We're going to take a break around 7:15 or so, and then reconvene. There is translation. Live. I didn't realize. Okay. So there's live translation if you need to have any French translation. And the bathrooms are right outside. So as I said, we're all really incredibly fortunate to be here with these 2 people, with Albert, who is an elder, a militant, a survivor, a fighter, a political prisoner, you know, a Black radical, really for decades, one of the most inspiring human beings, and Arlene Galloon, who is not yet a household name, but is really a Black female role model and hero, and is really, really bravely undertaking a really important class action lawsuit right now against Correctional Services Canada. Today, we're talking about the violence of prison and the violence of solitary confinement. So I think it's important to also note that Chelsea Manning and Oscar Lopez Rivera have actually been released just a few days ago as well. What I think it really means to have these 2 people here beside me is really to remind us that, you know, the violence of incarceration and of racialized surveillance and punishment is not something that only happens in the United States. It's really something that goes across the Americas and is really a larger system around the world today. You know, in the United States, after the abolition of slavery, there is really the immediate passing of the 13th Amendment, which really allowed slavery to continue under another name, under the name of incarceration. In Canada, though, we didn't have the same exact legal switch in that way. Immediately after the abolition of slavery in 1834, Black people have been heavily, heavily criminalized. You know, in the early 20th century, the incarceration rate of Black people was about 15 times higher than that of Black populations. Black women and men were really heavily targeted by policing and by prison, and that's something that, especially since the late 80s, we've seen a major boom, not only in the United States with the war on drugs, but also in Canada. So the violence of incarcerating Black communities and Indigenous communities in these 2 countries is something that there are many differences, but nonetheless still really overlaps. So today we're talking about fighting the injustice of solitary confinement, but it's important to remember that incarceration in general and policing in general has always been a form of violence against our communities. So, thanks. So first I'd like to introduce Arlene Galloon. She has spent, she is suing Correctional Services Canada, actually doing a class action lawsuit with her lawyer, challenging the practice of extended segregation after she spent 9 months in the Joliet Institution for Women, and during that time she spent 2 3-month stretches in solitary confinement. The United Nations says that anything over 15 days in solitary confinement constitutes torture, and what Arlene went through is so much more prolonged and so much more violent than that. So what she's really doing in terms of leading this lawsuit is potentially going to change so many other people's lives who are incarcerated. So it's just a really important struggle. So thank you, Arlene.
You're welcome.
Is there anything you want to say, or I could ask you a few questions?
You can ask me questions.
Okay. So in one of the medias that I saw, you were speaking about the conditions of solitary confinement, and you said, I felt like an animal. You do not lock a dog in a cage for 3 months. I think that a lot of Canadians, we understand that there's a certain kind of violent incarceration in the United States, but they don't realize how frequent the situation that happened to you really is. So I wondered if you could describe, life in solitary, the way that you were treated, and just sort of share your experience a little bit, if you feel comfortable.
Well, my life in solitary confinement was basically, I was in a room 23 on 24. I was being fed through a trap in the door, and the staff there, they were not human the way they treated me. Calling me names, swearing at me, telling me to shut up and all that stuff. And I just felt, because of what I was already going through, I was overwhelmed. So I wasn't really able or prepared to deal with the situation. So they just kept me in there and never let me out.
Did you want to talk at all about sort of the impacts that had on, your heart and your spirit and your...
Well, I suffered depression, I suffered insomnia, I suffered anxiety, and I'm still suffering from depression and anxiety now. My sleep got better, but I get nervous very fast.
So something I think that's really important and really beautiful and inspiring about the case that you're a part of is that you're not only challenging what happened to you, but it's a class action, it's something that's collective, and it stands to impact a lot of other people. Could you talk about why and what that means to you?
Just the fact to know that other people is going through what I'm going through, or went through what I went through, I would like to help them. And there's a lot of people that's suffering right now out there. Like, I know some people that spent years and months, and they told me that, oh, well, I've been through that, and this is how I felt, and stuff like that.
It's incredibly brave to have decided to take on the machine like that. Is this something that while you were inside, were you thinking about taking action? What made you decide really to take the decision to?
Because I thought enough was enough. Yeah. Like, something needed to change. It was ridiculous. They were using the whole as the first step. Like, they weren't even trying to come up to you and ask you what's the problem. They just, oh, you're out of control. You're going in the hole.
Has there been any pushback against you, if you feel comfortable talking about that, since you've decided to take this forward?
What do you mean?
I guess I just mean, let me see how to rephrase that. What you've decided to do, I guess, just like deciding to do this class action lawsuit. I guess I just wonder if there have been any repercussions, or if you feel like you're supported.
No, I feel like I'm supported.
Good. So I also wanted to ask you, I guess, yesterday we had been talking a little bit about, I think, just how people don't really realize the conditions of what it is like for somebody that has to be incarcerated, and you were talking a lot about just feeling like you're still, just like, I guess, the conditions of life during and afterwards, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, my conditions during was like I felt alone, and I felt like I was hurting my family, but really I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was a victim. And now um, I'm still going through a tough time with the law and the Correctional Service of Canada. They're still giving me a hard time, and I don't know how to cope with it.
Um, could you talk a little bit more about what you mean they're giving you a hard time, or would you rather not?
Well, just because as everybody knows, when you get out of jail, you have conditions and stuff like that. Well, I have a whole list of conditions that I have to follow and stuff, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
Can you talk about what you're hoping the outcome will be if this class action wins? Then what happens?
I'm hoping that I make a change to how they deal and handle with certain cases and how they deal and handle with people, and instead of just using that as a first resource, just to talk to the person and ask them how they're feeling and stuff like that. Don't just throw them right into the darkness, because it doesn't change a person. So I'm hoping I make a difference.
In Canada, really across the country, there's a way higher rates of Black and Indigenous people that are being held in solitary. The rates are a lot higher, and I wonder if you had anything to say about that.
Not really, because I don't really know about the rates in Canada, but I don't know. I don't know about the rates in Canada like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I really hope this case is really important and stands to change really a lot for people's conditions. So, is there anything else that you want to say about your case or about yourself or about?
I'm not going to give up.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's thank Arlene. All right, so if there's nothing else to add, then we're going to go on to talk now to Albert Woodfox, who is one of the main guests of honor tonight. So I'll just introduce you a little bit if you'd like, and then let you speak and ask some questions. So Albert Woodfox is a Black Panther activist and ex-political prisoner who was released in February 2016 at the age of 69 after having been detained and tortured for 45 years in the Angola Penitentiary in Louisiana, of which 43 years were spent in solitary confinement. No American prisoner has ever been put in solitary confinement for so long, from what I understand, and this really shows the lengths that the state will go to silence Black resistance and the threat of Black resistance, and it also really shows the resilience of the human spirit, and also of just the power of organizing to really free people's minds and make them strong. So what Albert has gone through, and the fact that he's come out and has been active this whole time, is really a testament to, I think, just the power of resistance as well, not just the power of the violence of the state. With Herman Wallace and Robert King, Albert Woodfox was part of a group known as the Angola Three, who were all sent to prison in 1971 to one of the most violent detention facilities in the United States. As members of the Black Panthers, they fought to defend prisoners' rights while inside. And I think something that really is a testament, especially to your story, Albert, is the fact that you've been fighting the whole time. I mean, you were fighting even before the heavy retaliation and the false charges that then led you to be incarcerated afterwards, and you kept fighting afterwards, even after you'd received that extreme punishment. I know, and the larger climate, of course, at this time in the 1970s was extremely heavy state repression, not only against Black prisoners that were politically active, of course, but against Black resistance movements more broadly. I mean, you have just targeted assassinations of Black community members. You have, trumped up charges against Angela Davis, Assata Shakur. Like, this was really a time of a heavy crackdown. They were trying to break Black communities. In Canada, too, there was heavy surveillance in Nova Scotia, in Montreal, and Toronto of Black activism overall. So Albert has always, the Angola Three have always maintained, in a sense, they're political prisoners who are really being punished for the fact that they'd been politically active this whole time. I mean, there have been so many appeals, evidence of racial discrimination, evidence that wasn't used, faulty evidence, etc. So in 2000, Herman, Robert, and Robert filed a civil suit challenging the inhumane and pervasive practice of long-term solitary confinement. And Robert King was released in 2001, Herman Wallace in 2013, and finally Albert was released in February of 2016, 43 years and 10 months after first being put in isolation for a crime that he didn't commit. So I really just, again, want to welcome you and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing your experience with all of us today. We're incredibly blessed, really, to be in your presence today.
First, I'd like to thank all of the individuals and organizations for inviting me to Canada to talk about the horrors of solitary confinement, the racist, institutional racism that make up the prison system as well as the judicial system in America. And I would like to thank the people here tonight as well as the people of Canada for being so wonderful since I've been here. As Robin has said, unfortunately, I've spent 40, I'd like to round it off to 44, but 43 years and 10 months in solitary confinement. I guess for most of you, you must be wondering, what is solitary confinement? Solitary confinement is when you are held in a cell for 23 hours out of the day, sometimes 24 hours. And you must find ways to fight for your sanity almost every day. You must find creative ways to feel a sense of self-worth, feel that you have a right to exist and you have a right to be treated with dignity and pride even though you are in prison. You are not subhuman. And so this was basically my story for the last 44 years. In between the word solitary confinement is a lifetime of hardships, miseries, inhumane treatment, watching men go insane, watching men kill themselves or severely injure themselves because of the pressure of being held in a cell no larger than most bathrooms for 23 and sometimes 24 hours a day. It is a story about me not being able to touch my family for 20 years because of doing visits. It is about struggle for dignity. It is about not eating for 45 days to stop the prison people from sliding my food and the food of everyone on the chair underneath the door and asking that food slots be cut into the bars so that the food could be handed to you in a dignified manner. It is a struggle about fighting against the inhumane and undignity of being forced to strip search, bend over, spread your buttocks and expose your genitalia in front of the whole tier you on, while correctional officers or prison guards or whatever term you want to use make derogatory remarks trying to evoke a reaction from you, so in times you could be gassed and beaten and put in isolation. It is about struggling. It is about teaching men who couldn't read or write, which contributed greatly to their being in prison, how to read and write, and opening the world to them. It is a struggle for the basic human treatment. It is a struggle about corruption. It is a struggle about men feeling that they have the right, based upon the position that they hold, to pay God with your life, to do to you whatever they feel they can do without any repercussion. It is about society not being concerned and not conducting any oversight on institutions of prison in America, and I'm sure in Canada and other countries around the world, and therefore making prison personnel feel invincible, and that they have the right, irregardless of what the Constitution of any particular country or what the laws of any particular country may say, that they are immune from that they are beyond uh, being punished for the things that they do in the name of the citizenship. And whenever they are usually questioned about their conduct, usually the first thing they do is hide behind the citizens of society, and use that as a rationale, or use that as an excuse to beat a man to death, or in my case, to hold a man in solitary confinement for 44 years, merely because I was a member of the Black Panther Party, merely because I dared to challenge the violence that were used by security staff against prisoners, the violence that were perpetuated by the conduct or lack of prison administrations that caused prisoners to prey upon other prisoners. I dared to challenge the sex slave markets that existed, in which young kids, 16 and 17 years old, being placed in adult facilities and being preyed upon by sexual predators. And so, for the last 44 years of my life, it has been constant struggle for humanity. It has been constant struggle for justice. It has been constant struggle against oppression. It has been constant struggle against suppression. And one of the things that the vows that I made to myself, that should I ever be free, that no one had ever spoken for those men and women held in solitary confinement, that no one had ever spoken out against the corruption of prison administrations, that no one had ever challenged the unconstitutional but more important, inhumane treatment of prisoners. I believe from the depths of my heart and soul that because a person may make a mistake for whatever reason and go to prison, that does not devalue that individual as a human being, and that he is entitled, maybe not to the same rights of a citizen still in society, but he still is entitled to be treated as a human being. He still is entitled to a certain amount of dignity, a certain amount of respect, and definitely he is entitled to a humane treatment. My reasons for being here is to encourage the people of Canada to not follow the examples of the correctional institutions in America. At one time, solitary confinement was a punishment. It was a system started by a religious organization, but now solitary confinement in America has become a way of imprisoning people. So you don't have to break rules or regulations. If you come to prison, you are put into solitary confinement automatically. Now, what solitary confinement means is usually you're not allowed to have contact visits with family members. There are difficult rules and regulations you might live by that cause you more pain and suffering than being held in a cell 23 hours a day can cause. It is being exposed to abuse on a daily basis. It is being exposed to violence by security staff because you demand to be treated a certain way. And so this has been my battle for the last 44 years of my life, and it will continue to be my battle and until my time on this earth is up.
So the first question that I had for you was about, I mean, you've been a Black activist for longer than I've been alive, longer than many of us here have been alive. So I wanted to ask your opinion on what the links that there seem to be treated between Black activism and danger. I mean, I was looking back into some of the details of your case and looking at how Burl Cain specifically had cited Black Pantherism as one of the reasons for the solitary confinement that you were placed in, and you were also called the most dangerous, what is it? The most dangerous, I have this somewhere, sorry guys. I think the most dangerous prisoner, anyways, you were very much associated with being like one of the most dangerous prisoners in the United States, even though they were actually also saying at the same time that you were, like Burl Cain had even said that you were a model prisoner. So what is, in your opinion, I guess as someone that's both a prisoner and really has always been an activist, what is dangerous about you and what's dangerous about Black organizing inside and outside of prison?
Well, I think what's dangerous about me is that I refuse to be treated any less than a human being. Excuse me, I'm new at this. Uh, I guess, it's just something in me. It's hard to put in words emotions or positions that one takes in life. And, prior to joining the Black Panther Party, I'm sorry to say, I was a petty criminal and a predator upon my own neighborhood, my own people, and I contributed nothing to society. Uh, there was a time when my mom fought so hard against the voice of the street, but unfortunately the voice of the street was stronger than my mom's voice, and so I became a petty criminal, as I say. Uh, for the first time in my life in the 1960s, I heard a voice that was stronger than the voice of the street, and that was the voice of the Black Panther Party. For the first time in my life, I was exposed to African Americans talking about community and talking about the rights to be treated as humans and not be victims of racism and not be victims of oppression, that they had the right to homes and they had the right to jobs and they had the right to education and medical care, that they had a right to opportunities, not more rights than other citizens, but the same rights. And those things were being denied. So, eventually, as I said, the party's voice was louder than the voice of the street, and I eventually petitioned the party to become a member, even though I was in prison. And the one thing about the Black Panther Party that, really impressed me is that they felt as though everyone deserved an opportunity to change. And so, whereas under normal circumstances I would have been denied the right, the party embraced me and they said, "You have value. You have the right to be treated as a human being, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to support you." And in return, they asked that, I live my life a certain way, which I've done for the last 44 years, that I upheld the 10-point program at the part of the Black Panther Party, and that I took a stand against injustice, no matter what form it was in, and no matter where I met it, and no matter what the cost would be to me as an individual. And I willingly accepted that, and I've tried to live my life that way for the last 40-something years.
Sort of following from your answer, I wanted to ask you a bit more. I mean, I think you're you're famous for having survived 44 years in solitary confinement, but what is less well known is a lot of the amazing stuff that you were doing while you were behind bars. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what it really meant. You opened, I think, the first Black Panther party behind bars, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what that looked like. What did political education look like then, in terms of, you know, like what were you reading, what were you thinking about, like what was inspiring you, and how were you working, how was it functioning at that time?
Well, you know, at that time, Harmon, you know, I'm sorry to say, who passed away 3 days after winning his freedom from liver cancer. Harmon and I were actively involved in the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, and we were at that time, Angola had been designated by the Justice Department in America as being the most violent and bloody prison in America. Almost every week, someone were being killed or maimed or hurt seriously, either by security staff or by other prisoners who were being protected by corrupt correctional officers and corrupt prison administration. You had a situation where you had 300 security people and administration trying to supervise 5,000 prisoners. So there were various techniques that were used. One was the inmate guards. These were prisoners who had usually life sentence, and they were given the same authority plus a gun as security officers who worked there, or the term they used to use at that time, they used to call them free men. And so, you know, we felt as though, you know, this was wrong. It was undignified. They would bring food to the prison, and food that was meant for the prison population was being taken by the security people or the administration. And, you know, like if they would send chicken or pork chops or whatever, they would take that and we would get bologna instead, you know. And it pretty much went that way with, you know, pretty much all the food, clothing that was meant for prison population were usually confiscated by, or stolen. I'm saying confiscated, stolen by, you know, prison administration and security staffs. And and then there was a thriving sex slave market going on, in which correctional officers benefited from it personally. And so, you know, in order to effectively challenge these conditions, challenge these practices, Harmon and I felt as though, you know, we couldn't do it by ourselves. So we set out to raise the level of consciousness, is the term we use, of other prisoners, and make them understand that no matter the color of their skin, and no matter what charge they were in prison and all, they all had a common enemy, and they all had a common goal. The common goal was they had a right to be treated with dignity and respect. And the common enemy was the omnipotent belief by prison personnel that they could do whatever they wanted to do to prisoners without any repercussion, without paying any consequences. And they felt that way because society put in them a blind trust and failed to conduct the proper oversight, and, you know, in which members of society would come in to these prisoners and talk to the prisoners and see what the conditions was, see how they were being treated, and whether or not the Constitution or the laws of the United States were being obeyed by prison staff. So, again, you know, I'm here to ask the people of Canada to not allow that to happen. You know, America has done a wonderful job of public relations and presenting itself to the rest of the world as the greatest democracy. Well, as one of its victims, I'm here to tell you that America is not the greatest democracy. It is the greatest hypocrisy. We are good at preaching to the rest of the world on how they should live and what kind of government what they should have, and then we turn around and we give the world Donald Trump. You know, so I encourage the people of Canada to make demands upon their political leaders to not be influenced by whatever political system or whatever economic system or judicial system or whatever that may exist in America, but take the time to cultivate political system, economic system, social system based upon the will and the need of the citizens of Canada, not America. You know. And so that's, one of the reasons I'm here.
Thank you. I want to ask another question that's a bit related to activism, but in another way. I wonder because, one of the reasons that there was so much publicity to your case was because of the things that have been happening to you, but also because of the mobilizations that were happening outside to free the Angola 3 and to free political prisoners more broadly. So I was interested in hearing more about, I guess, your reflections on, how you experienced support or at different times while you're behind bars, and the role and importance of support for political prisoners more broadly and for prisoners in general more broadly.
Well, my journey to this podium tonight started April 17, 1972, when an officer by the name of Brent Miller was found stabbed to death in one of the dormitories. Because of my political activism, because of the fact that I had dared challenge the status quo of the prison administration as well as the practices of the security staff, I automatically became the primary suspect, and I was the very first person that was put in what is called a dungeon. The dungeon is even more restrictive than solitary confinement, and you are placed in a cell actually for 24 hours a day. The cell is empty. There's no bunk, no stuff. You're forced to live or lay on a concrete floor. You are given, it has evolved, but there was a time when you were fed 2 slices of bread 3 times a day. And eventually that evolved because of protests and because of legal challenges. It evolved to where you got 1 hot meal every 3 days. And so now it has evolved to where guys in the dungeon, or isolation as they call it now, they get regular meals. They don't get dessert, but they get, the basic meals that's served to the rest of the prisoner population, And so, you just struggle, it's more instinctive. With me, the struggle for me was on 2 fronts. Excuse me. First, the struggle was to change. As I said, I was born and I was a victim of a political society that almost guaranteed I was going to be a petty criminal, and that almost guaranteed that 1 out of every 4 African Americans would wind up in prison. So in that process, I had adopted a lot of anti-social, anti-humane principles, and so I had to change all that in order for me to be able to look at another man and ask him to change. I had to be able to say that, I've been there. So I'm living proof that you can change if you want it. That you don't have, the way you start is not what's important. It's where you finish. And so you can change. So that took a great deal of self-education on my part. It took a great deal of, myself and Robert and Harmon. We realized at some point that our struggles could not continue to be physical. It was no way we could physically, let me tell you, you do not want to go on a 45-day hunger strike. It takes a great will and a great spirit and a great belief in something that's bigger than yourself, bigger than life even itself, to sustain a 45-day hunger strike. And after that, you stand and you eat between the bars as a compromise until food slots are cut in the bars by the prison administration. So rather than have your food set on the floor and slid under the door to you, you agree to be able to stand it and hold your tray and eat through the bars. Now, of course, you don't think this is going to be 18 months that you're going to eat like this, but that's what it became. 18 months. We thought that maybe in a few weeks that, they would come and they would cut the food slots in the bars. So we actually ate through the bars for 18 months. And in that time, they said, contradiction is the mother of change and creation. All type of creative techniques were developed. Guys made slings on their bars, and eventually there were little trays made out of cardboard, where you could set the tray on it. But the fact is, it lasted 18 months. It lasted far longer than it should have. What could have been done in a few weeks' time, it took them 18 months to do it. And I cannot tell you, especially if you have a history, or the history of chattel slavery, the humiliating experience of being strip searched just because you're leaving out of your cell. When you are in solitary confinement, every time you leave your cell, there are two musts. You must be put in restraints, and you must be strip searched. And when you leave your cell, and wherever you go, even though you never leave the presence of a security officer, you are never out of the eyesight of those security officers. When you come back and go in your cell, you have to strip search again, under the disguise of looking for contraband, knowing that it is no way possible that you could have contraband because you never had the opportunity. You're not allowed to associate with other prisoners, say if you go to the hospital on a call out. So those are the kind of things that I've spent, and fought successfully in some cases. I did. I was beaten because I refused. At some point in time, we, myself and Robert King, who was on the tier that I was on, we realized that the strip search, they had a direct history to chattel slavery, that they served no meaningful purpose other than to degrade and humiliate and destroy the sense of self confidence in prisoners. And so we petitioned the warden's office to use other means. There are other technology that existed in which prisoners could be searched for contraband. So we asked that be used, and of course it was denied. So we decided that we would take a stand, and we would no longer submit to strip searches. And as a result of that, myself and other prisoners were beaten for refusing. We were placed in the dungeon. We were forced to come out of the dungeon, and after 10 days, and so that we could be brought back to the dungeon. And the same process, they would demand a strip search, and I would refuse, and 5 or 6 more security officers would jump me, and they would start beating and kicking me, and they would tear my whatever clothing I had off, and they would pick me up and slam me on the desk, and they would forcibly spread my buttocks, and they would make comments. And while doing this, they would be making derogatory comments. And so this was a part of what solitary confinement was, and this was a part of what I spent many years of my life fighting against.
We have about 10 minutes before the break, so maybe we'll have time for one more question, and then when we come back, we'll go to audience questions. So I guess the question that I want to ask now, if it's going to be my last one, is could you talk about, I mean, today, like you've spent so much of your life in prison, and I wonder, like, what inspires you today? I asked this to Robert King as well, but I mean, in terms of social movements, in terms of, I mean, we're like inundated with Black death and incarceration still. I mean, the death of Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, and I wonder if you have any relationship to, or if you're inspired by any of the Black liberation movements that are sort of starting to really have a resurgence now. For example, Black Lives Matter and things like that.
Well, I am a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. I support them 100%. 100%. I have met with some of the young leaders, Black Lives Matter. As a matter of fact, when Robert and I, we met with the leadership of Black Lives Matter. We were, not too long ago, we were in England, and there is a Black Lives Matter movement there, and we were fortunate enough to be able to meet with the young people. I think, part of what gave me the strength to continue to struggle and to not allow, the prison administration to break me, to break my will, to break my spirit, to make me renounce my political beliefs, my association with the Black Panther Party, is that I felt as though if I could last just one day longer than them, that some young man, a young woman, a young child would pick up the mantle of social struggle. And so my struggle at that time was not so much to see a successful revolution as to continue the struggle, to give, to hopefully be an example to other generations of the strength and determination of the human spirit. So I felt as though if I could deny them the right to break me, then that would inspire other people that they had the same strength. That they just had to be willing to make the sacrifice. They had to, in my vast array of readings, from Mr. Nelson Mandela, I learned that if the cause you believe in is noble to you, you can carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so that was my position in life. I thought that I was fighting for the dignity of humanity, and whatever, evils that I was confronted with, I thought I had an obligation as a member of the Black Panther Party and as a social activist to take a stand and to organize and to try to eliminate that evil. As I said, there were few and many successes in between the 44 years of struggling, but each successful, each victory emboldened me and other men to continue the struggle. So that's basically what, how I was able to continue the struggle. And, but on a personal side, there was a time, when my mom was, trying to give me qualities of life, such as loyalty and devotion and moral values and the code of conduct and stuff. But I was too young and too arrogant to understand what she was the gift that she was trying to give me. And so I rejected it. And as I said, I rejected what she was trying to give me for the values of the criminal life. But I'm happy to say that before, I lost her in 1994 to cancer. But before she passed away, I am proud and happy to say that I became the kind of man that I thought she would be proud of, the kind of man she had fought so hard. And I was able to tell her that she was my true hero. A lot of the things I did and the beliefs I had, I thought came from the books of a great men and women throughout history. But what I realized is that those books brought in out of me what my mother had put in me. And so I will forever be grateful for the woman that she was.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break now, and I just really, again, want to extend, because I know, Arlene, you have to leave. I really want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and your voice and what you're contributing to the struggle now as well. And again, thank you so much, Albert Woodfox, for speaking. So we'll restart again in 15 minutes. So we're going to begin in about 2 minutes. So get ready. All right, everybody, so welcome back from the break. As I said before the break, now is really the time for, I'm sure that all of you have so many questions that you want to ask Albert, so now's the time that you can either go up to one of the two microphones or Jude can bring the microphone to you.
Hi.
There he is. We'll just ask that you keep your questions, relatively short, or like edit them to make sure that he knows what the question is and things like that. So now's your chance.
If people want to ask questions, like if they're more comfortable in French, Natalie's going to translate it in English.
Yeah, it's actually
Hi.
Oh, sorry. You're next. He's next. Was there somebody?
We can come back.
We'll come back.
Hi. Well, I'm probably speaking for everybody in this room, or maybe I'll start by saying for myself, I wish I just had 1% of your courage, I guess, and dignity. And, you've given me personally, a lot to think about just from your talk, just about how to conduct your life on a day-to-day basis. So just day to day, I guess, how did you spend your days?
So many different ways. The thing about solitary confinement is in prison, routine. They feed you at a certain time. I think the only thing that may have differed is when you come out the shower. They start the shower at least in Angola at a different cell each day. So, but stuff like when they feed or what they call sick call, call outs, that's when you being taken to the hospital or to see an official from some other department. But so in between that, you try to make that routine, you know, seem different somehow. And so you just, I always tell people if they want to get a good idea of what it was like for me, try to, pick out a day of the week and stay in your bathroom for 23 hours. Don't come out, you know. Let your family members bring you your food and all that. And I think you'll get a good idea of what it's like to be held in a particular confined area for 23 hours out of the day. Of course, it's not decades, but it will still give you some idea what it's like. Yes, CCR was an evolving situation. When I was originally out, April 18th, the day after Brent Miller was found dead, I was placed in solitary confinement. CCR is the acronym for solitary. It means closed cell restriction. And so, of course, I never thought I would be locked up for decades. So you just as I say, you just try to you take the routine that is almost guaranteed, and you try to make it seem different somehow, and I can't, people have asked me how did I do it, and I really don't have an answer. It's kind of hard to put some things, some emotions, or some philosophies that, inside of you into words. I have asked myself many times, why did I not, go insane, or why did I not try to commit suicide, or why did I not injure myself, just to go to the hospital so I could get out of the cell for a few hours. So I have no idea. Maybe it was, depending on what your personal beliefs are, maybe, the powers that be uh, allowed me to survive CCR, or solitary confinement, so that I could be here tonight and warn the people here against the horrors of solitary confinement. It serves no penological purpose. Its main purpose is to break human beings, to destroy their spirit, destroy their sense of self-worth, destroy their self-confidence, and I don't see where that's, just destroying a human being is not an honorable act. And so I don't see why, the prison people feel so free to use it. Or, I know why, but I don't understand what's going on inside of their mind, or their hearts, or their souls, where they cannot feel guilty for treating another human being like this.
Did that answer your question? Oh, hey, you raised your hand before, right?
Guy right there. Yeah,
You actually kind of answered the first question that I had, even though it still remains mysterious for me. How you were able to maintain the kind of sanity, and because I would only imagine I can stand 23 hours in bed if I'm in a coma, but not if I'm, conscious. So the second question would be, how are you able to keep your humanism in such inhumane environment?
keep my what?
Your like your humanism, like kind of.
Oh, my humaneness, because my
Humane.
cause was humanity. Because I believe that, human beings are the greatest thing in existence on this planet. And I think that while we are lacking in some areas, uh, we've done wonderful things as a species. And I think, we can and deserve to be better than what we are now. You know, oh, okay. And so that's pretty much how I held on to my humanity.
Okay, we got one other question here.
You had been in prison for 45 years. It sounds very, very horrible. And then
44 years.
I added one. And then you were released. What was it like for you when you were released? And were you able to, how is it adjusting to life outside of prison after all of these years? And when you left, what did they allow you to leave with?
Well, solitary confinement in Angola was unique in that the the cells were not a concrete box with a door. The front of the cells had a bar system. So if I choose, I could communicate with uh, the prisoners on either side of me. And when you came out for the 1 hour to exercise, or to, to shower and stuff, you could communicate with anybody on the tier. So, but let me tell you, some of the conversations you do not want to be a part of. So, that's pretty much, you know, how I was able to communicate. But I want to emphasize the fact that I could talk to another human being. Uh, Nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, CCR evolved to where we were allowed to have TVs, and we were allowed to have CD players and record radios and stuff. Nothing, absolutely nothing takes away the horror of being forced to stay in a confined area for 23 hours. And the fact that men still went insane, men still committed suicide, men still injured themselves just to get out the cell or go to the hospital is proof of that. With all these TVs and all the other little toys that they had, it did not stop the suicide rate, it did not stop guys from injuring themselves, and it did not cause the deterioration of a lot of prisoners' humanity. There is one of the most despicable acts I could ever imagine when prisoners were throwing human waste on one another as a means of fighting. And that comes from the total deterioration of humanity. That the conditions of confinements that you live in, are forced to live in for decades, and, or years at a time, can make you stoop to that level.
I think the question he was asking was about the way you adapted when you came out. Would you address that?
Say it again.
Yeah, how did you adapt to life outside?
Well, I'm still adapting, you know. Pretty much everything is a new experience to me. But I think the greatest, I have four, I have a daughter, 3 grandkids, and 4 great grandkids from the ages of 3 to 11. So they, have been a focus of, my being free. For me, I've been free a long time. I've always said that, freedom for me was a state of mind. My biggest suggestions was being able to walk beyond 9 feet, turn 6 feet. The cell was 9 by 6 by 12, 12 feet high, 9 feet long, 6 feet wide. So the biggest adjustment for me with freedom was being able to walk beyond 9 feet, or being able to, as strange as it may seem, you would think that in solitary confinement, you would enjoy the company of other, and I really enjoyed being alone sometimes. Sometimes the environment around you can make you not want to be a part of what's going on around you, and eventually I began to understand that this was a form of insanity. That a lot of things some of these guys did that irritated me was a form of insanity, and I just hadn't developed the wisdom to recognize what was, right before me. But once I, began to understand what was going on, it made me much easy. It made it much easier for me to quote with, like some guys, they rattle the bars all day. Some guys sing, scream. Some guys bang, like beating the drums on the concrete table that's in the cell, and so this is a form of insanity. This is their way of quoting with the pressure of not being able to walk beyond 9 feet, 24 hours, 23 hours a day.
Hi, thank you for coming and sharing experiences. It's been really just amazing. And I guess my question kind of piggybacks off of what you just said, because the way you're describing this and me trying to wrap my head around your experience, I feel like exhausted, and especially like you coming out of like 44 years. How are you still like so active, and how are you not exhausted? Like, I guess it's maybe, yeah, because I can't imagine not being completely just wanting to.
Insane, you mean?
Yeah. And just
Well,
wanting
I didn't
to
say
just,
I
like,
was,
stop
wasn't,
talking
I
about
didn't
it.
say I was sane. I just said I'm not insane, you know. You know, you know, when I joined the Black Panther Party, one of the things that the principles of the party was to define the person you are. So a very long time ago, I defined the kind of human being I wanted to be. And, you know, I consider myself to be a man of great moral principles. I consider myself to be a man with a value system based upon humanity. I consider to have a discipline that would allow me to live amongst my fellow human beings and be productive to contribute to their welfare as a member of society. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to do. You know, a lot of people ask me, am I angry? Of course I'm angry. You know, they took 44 years of my life, but they're not going to take from me who I am. They're not going to tell me how I should respond to being free after 44 years. So I figured the best way or the best thing for me to do after being free was to make sure that another man or woman or even children never face the horrors of solitary confinement again. So that's my mission, you know, to eliminate solitary confinement. And if I can't eliminate it, to so severely restrict it till, you know, someone being held in solitary confinement for years and decades will never happen again.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I am up there. Thank you for sharing your story with us and teaching us also so much. A few years ago, I did a project. I wanted to listen and hear the stories of Black people who were incarcerated in Canada, all Black men. And I had a lot of discussions with them. And at the end, I realized that nobody had, let's say, a perspective that allowed them to see that it's the system that brings them into the world of criminality sometimes. And I was wondering why. And at some point you said that you were arrogant. You said those words, I'm sorry. And I was wondering why. Like, there was a sense of fault in them, that it was their fault that they were there. And I was wondering, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, you know, I've always felt that, you know, under the U.S. Constitution, I was a slave of the state. And I think that the slave has the right to resist. The slave has the right to fight for freedom. So I felt perfectly within my right to resist attempts by the state of Louisiana and Department of Correction to determine what kind of human being I was going to be, and to break my spirit, break my will. They actually tried to make a deal with me several times that if I would renounce my association with the Black Panther Party, is if I would give up my philosophy about society, if I would stop my prison activism, they would let me out of solitary confinement. 44 years later, they got the answer. And so, you know, that's pretty much who I am, you know, what I believe in and what I'm struggling for.
Hi. Okay. Thanks again for everything and your huge inspiration, I'm sure, for many people. So, my question is actually if you can go back to that time of like when I read somewhere that you met Black Panther Party and people in Harlem at one point.
Yes.
And I sort of read about that, and I was just always really curious, like if you can just describe more about that time and that energy and how those people are and kind of the politics and things like that. Because I mean, we're all talking about solitary confinement and the horrors of it, but what about, the good side and how to plan for the future and all that?
Well, as I said, there was a time when I was a petty criminal. I made my living or my survival by, preying on other people. But when the Black Panther Party was first formed, it exploded. The fact that, black men armed themselves and went to the state legislature and demanded an end to racism and brutality and attacks upon the black community. They thought that these were crazy, using the N-word. And so they exploded not only upon America, they exploded upon the world. And so while I was aware of them, I was still a petty criminal. And so they had no impact on me. I was convicted of an armed robbery, my original charge, and I was sentenced to 50 years. The day that I was sentenced, I exercised my right as a slave and escaped or ran away. And since I was familiar with Harlem as a result of my criminal life, there's a thing called territorial imperative, where, you like to be in territory that you're familiar with. It gives you a sense of security and direction, whatever. So I knew Harlem, so that was my destination. And so I eventually wound up in Harlem, and as a result of being in Harlem, I noticed Panthers in the neighborhood, moving around in the neighborhood, from selling papers to escorting senior citizens, to the supermarket or the corner stores, to holding conversation with people in the community. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see the fear in African people that I normally saw all of my life. And I noticed that when the police were patrolling, I noticed a fear in them that I normally would see in black people. And so, that made an impact. But in all honesty, my biggest attraction were the sisters. Man, they had some beautiful women in the party, But I didn't realize at the time that the beauty that I was seeing was coming from within. I mean, they were beautiful outside, but the beauty that was making an impression on me was the beauty that was coming from within, the strength and the intelligence and moral fiber and a purpose in life, something that they were willing to give their lives for. And, I went around by one of the Panther chapters, and I didn't know what the hell they was talking about. I would just, but every time I would try to get with one of these sisters, they would be talking about revolution, and I was totally lost, So I was like running into a brick wall at every chance I got, And the real impact of the party is eventually I was arrested and the extradition warrant. And so I was fighting extradition, and there was a group called Panther 21. It happened in New York. So some of the members were placed on the 2-hour zone. So they immediately started having classes, or political classes, in which they made attempts to raise the level of consciousness of the other prisoners, to make them aware that as human beings they had certain rights, and that no man or no institution or no laws or whatever had a right to take that from them. And so, for a while, I was, I guess you could say, I was hearing what they were saying, but I wasn't listening. And then I read, a guy came now, and he had a fictional book called A Different Drummer. And that was the book that changed my life. The book was basically about the migration of African Americans from the southern part to the northern part of the country because they thought it was better, or they had, a better chance at a life. And of course, we know that that was not true. But after reading that book, all of a sudden the things that I was hearing, I began to understand. And I began to feel that, well, maybe I can make a difference. And so that was kind of like, but I still hadn't joined the Black Panther Party. Although I was associated with them, I was involved in, some of you may know about the riots in Attica, and they had riots in some of New York's consist of boroughs, and so you had what's equivalent to city jails. You had riots there, and because of I call it political awareness, consciousness that I had learned from the meetings I was attending, I became one of what they would say a ringleader. I would say a representative of the guys on the tier I lived with, and so eventually I lost the fight for extradition, and I was sent back to New Orleans. In the interim, the police had attacked the black chapter of the Black Panther Party in New Orleans, and there was a shootout and stuff. So they had created this special tier in which the men from the Black Panther Party were being housed. It was called C1. So when I came, because of my activism in the jails in New York, they had on my record that I was a Panther. So, that during that time, anybody who dared to resist what was going on was automatically a Panther, So when I got to New Orleans, they put me on the tier with the other Panthers. So that was my first up-close living with Panthers in New Orleans. And it was there that, as a result of the continual classes and creation of a political, the term we use is politicized. I became politicized. And the guy on the tier who was in leadership, his name was Charles Scott. I'm sorry to say he's not with us any longer. I asked him, could I join the party? And he said, yeah. And he submitted my name and stuff to headquarters in Oakland. And I was accepted. So it was at that point that I joined the Black Panther Party. And although the party as an organization don't exist, once a Panther, always a Panther.
I have a question here.
I was wondering if you'd be able to speak about the prison strike that occurred last year on September 9th, or just like about organizing internally within prisons in general. I'm just wondering
sorry,
about
could you speak a little
strategies of
louder?
prisoners. Pardon?
Could you speak a little louder?
Oh, a little louder. I was wondering if you could speak about the prison strike that occurred on September 9th last year, or about like internal organizing in general. I'm just wondering about strategies used and how prisoners are able to organize internally despite intense surveillance and the control that they're under.
You mean the California prison system?
No, there was a strike.
Demonstrations against solitary confinement?
There was a strike against the prison industrial complex, like through the Free Alabama movement. I'm wondering about that one, or just like internal. Like I'm wondering how prisoners are able to organize internally despite being under so much surveillance.
Well, basically, they are what we refer to them as a prison abolitionist group or prison reform groups who actually brought to light this major corporations around the world have began to exploit slave labor, because that's what you are when you are under the Constitution, and when you are duly convicted of a felony, you become a slave of the state. And these incorporations had begun to sign contracts with prisons in which prison slaves were producing their products. And for me, this is only a short step against the attacks of the working class men and women of the world. It is a threat to the sanity of the family, because if state slaves are producing, holding jobs that would normally go to them, then families are at threats. You know, these corporations are only concerned with the bottom line, and so if they can exploit a prisoner who's making 2 cents an hour to 20 cents an hour as to whether just paying say minimum wage. Excuse me, coming down with a cold. So as a result of that, there were some unsavory practices that were going on in prison, like relabeling canned goods that had expired, and just making products. I mean, Victoria's Secrets, the famous underwear, they were found guilty. Coca-Cola, to name a few. Walmart's, some of the major corporations, world corporations, were found. I mean, now, of course, when they were exposed, they stopped. But but you still have other major corporations that really don't care, that have no moral foundation, and they still exploiting slave labor. They still having now. For me, from my analysis, this is a direct attack upon the working class of the world. It's a direct attack on families, because if I can't get a job, if I can't provide the basic necessities for my family, food, shelter, medical care, education, and opportunity, then I'm under attack. And I hope at some time, I think, and this is my personal view, I think the labor unions around the world are doing a very poor job of representing organized labor right now in this world. Because I don't know of any labor union now that has taken a position on this. And I don't know why. Their members are being threatened. The job security or their members are being threatened by prison industrial complex and major corporations, signing contracts. So.
Hi. Well, first I just have to say, I think.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
First, I have to say, I think it's a miracle that you did all this time and you still have your New York accent.
Thank you.
Is it? I heard Poisonal, so I thought it was New York. That's where I'm from. You talked about your mother and the values that she gave you. And you also said that when she died in the 90s, you felt that you had been able to communicate to her. I wanted to know more about that and whether you had contact with her, how that was.
Well, I used to get visits until my mom passed away. She would visit me twice a month, her, my sister, and brothers. And so it was a matter of years of education, developing wisdom from my experiences, what I was going through on a daily basis, and being able to define the kind of human being I wanted to be, and making a commitment within myself that I would be this kind of human being. I would live this way, irregardless of what the consequences, even if it meant sacrificing my life. I would not go back to being a petty criminal, and I would not go back to being a willing victim of a corrupt society. And for a long time, I thought that the books I read, I read Franz Fanon, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, all the great scholars, and leaders of the world, Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong, As a matter of fact, when I was in the party, one of the required readings was they used to call it the Little Red Book, It was a lot of quotations by Mao Zedong based upon Chinese Revolution. And so I thought that the qualities I had as a human being were given to me by these men and women. But at some point in time, I developed enough wisdom to realize that, hey, my mama give me this. They just bringing this out of me. I've matured enough to the point where what my mama was trying to say, and I wouldn't listen, that I'm listening now. But
did she die knowing that you knew this?
Yes, I'm happy to say that. I'm sorry to say that at the time she was, suffering from cancer. And my brother, brought her for a visit. She didn't even let cancer stop her from visiting. And I was able to sit down and hold her hand and, thank her for being the great woman she was and let her know that the man I had become, I hope she could be proud of it because she was the reason. She gave me the foundation to be the man that I am today. And she says, thank you, baby, and Mama is very proud of you. And I carry that with me everywhere I go and in everything I do.
I also just wanted to know the circumstances of how you got out. Who helped you? What legal things transpired?
Well, first of all, we had a local group called the Coalition to Free the Angola Tree. That was consisted of mostly people that lived in Louisiana. Because they were able to keep the cause of the A3 before the public, and eventually other organizations found out. But I think probably the turning point was when Amnesty International found out about our case. And after investigating, they come to the conclusion that we constituted political prisoners or prisoners of conscience. That the only reason we were being held in prison, even though overwhelming evidence showed that we were innocent of the crime we had been charged with, was because of our political beliefs and because of our political activity in organizing protests and hunger strikes against prison corruption and prison conditions, constituted under their agenda political prisoner. So I'm not sure, but I think we may have been the first group, in America in which Amnesty embraced and threw their support on. And of course, as a result of Amnesty, then the whole world started learning about A3 and what we were going through and stuff. I'm sorry we don't have enough time, but there is actually a bloody fingerprint, identifiable, that was found on the door that Officer Miller was found. They matched it against me and Harmon and two other friends, and it didn't match. And they know who it's for, but they, to this day, will not admit who that fingerprint is. Now, they had the fingerprints of every prisoner in Angola at the time Officer Miller was murdered. And the Attorney General, D. Buddy Caldwell, he made a statement during an interview. He said that the interviewer asked him, who did this fingerprint belong to? Or you going to your office going? He said, no, we're not concerned with that. We got the men who killed Brent Miller. know. So we're not going to try to match this fingerprint, you know. It changes nothing, you know. This bloody fingerprint could have, you know, got on that door a million ways. So, you know, and this is his way of looking at it, you know. So, I mean, that's the type of justice we were faced with, you know. So there is a bloody, identifiable bloody fingerprint. There are skin samples and stuff that they found under the fingernails of Brent Miller, and none of this matched us. But and strangely, when the technology such as DNA evolved, all of a sudden, all of this has been lost. Everything but the bloody fingerprint has been lost. They couldn't lose that because our attorneys had copies of it. So, you know, we weren't even able to you know, use DNA as a means of defense, you know. And during my second trial, you know, my case was overturned 4 times. 3 times the appeal court reversed it. Each time it was because of misconduct on the district attorney office, or racial discrimination and gender discrimination. The one time that federal judge granted me a new trial based upon a grand jury form of discrimination. Under the American judicial system, you have a one person that leads the grand jury, and the U.S. Supreme Court upheld that ruling. So that's, you know, forced them, they had to retry me. But because they were trying to hide all of this evidence from DNA examination, they had no evidence. So we were in a situation. So the final ruling that Judge Brady, a federal judge, made was, it's called an exceptional writ. He overturned my conviction. He ordered the state of Louisiana not to retry me and to release me immediately. Well, under the judicial system in America, his ruling was not final. So the state ran to the appellate court, which is a higher court, and in this case is the Fifth Circuit. And after several months, they reversed his ruling and said that the state could retry me. They had a right, you know. But how were they going to retry me? They had no evidence, according to them, you know. Witnesses had died. You know, under normal circumstances, I would have been freed. But because of my political beliefs and political activism, because it was a prison guard had been killed, even though 40-something years later, they still were persecuting me because of who I am, not what I did. And members of the Miller family. And in a strange way, people ask me, you know, how I feel. I really don't blame them, because as far as they was concerned, a member of their family had been killed. And they had a right, a moral right, and a family obligation to pursue whoever killed their relative. Now, I am angry that, in spite of overwhelming evidence, that we were innocent. The only one was Brent Miller's widow. You know, after seeing all the evidence or lack of, she came to the conclusion that innocent men had been convicted for the death of her husband. And she actually made a public statement, and she actually went to several events, A3 events, in support of our, you know, and for the call for us to be free. You know, so that's the kind of justice system we have in America, and we had to fight against it. And it took 44 years for, you know, me to be free.
I have a question here.
Now I want that kind of system in Canada.
Hi. I was wondering if you could maybe speak to a bit what was, or how were you organizing, or how did organizing work as a Black Panther while on the inside? Like, logistically, how were you organizing, politicizing other people? How did that work? And especially in solitary.
Well, I mean, we had codes, we had letters, we wrote to one another. Sometimes the letters didn't get to their destination, but they were useless to security, because they couldn't break the code. Only we knew the code. And there were even some security people who believed in what we were fighting for. And they would, pass communications back and forth between, Harmon Wallace, who we lost 3 days after freedom. He was on tier, but Robert and I, Robert King, we lived on the same tier for 15 years or more. So, communication between him and I was very easy, but, we had to develop a code system, and we would communicate with Harmon. And then there were all kind of, techniques. Our families used to come visit together. So we would visit in the same visiting area, even though we were behind the screen. We would try to get in the booths next to one another, and that way our families could congregate in front of and they could switch back and forth. And eventually we were, after 20-something years, we were allowed contact visits, something that they hid from us for over 10 years. It was in 1974, there was because of so many civil suits being filed, there was what's called a consent decree. It's agreement between the state of Louisiana, the Department of Correction, and the Justice Department. And in that agreement, solitary confinement prisoners were supposed to get contact visits. But what they did is when they passed out copies of the consent decree, they moved that part out. So we went over 10 years. Now, how we found out is, in 1987, I filed an ARP. That's a complaint against something that was a conduct of a security guard. So their response was to send me a copy of the consent decree. But they sent me the whole copy. So I'm in my cell going through, the thing, and I come across, this page, and that said CCR shall be allowed to visit an A building. Well, the A building is where contact visits take place. So Robert was a few cells down, so I called down to him. I said, King, we supposed to have contact visits. He like, based upon what? I say, I'm looking at a copy of the consent decree that they sent me. They actually took the page out of it that grants us contact visits. So he said, well, send it down, let me read it. So I sent it down to him, he read it, and a lot of other guys on the tier wanted to read it, so we passed it up and down the tier. So I, in turn, turned around and filed another ARP, demanding contact visits based upon things. So it was granted, which was a shock to me. I thought they would, deny it, and I would have to go in the court system to get it enforced. But they granted it, and so after 21 years, close to 22 years, I had my first contact visit with my family, and I was able to sit down at a table. I was able to hug and kiss my mom and my niece and sister, and it's kind of hard to even put those kind of emotions in the words, but it was probably one of the best times of my life. That's how we organize. We use letters with codes, but you have to understand that in order for you to organize a protest, there must be a reason. And it must be a reason that affects everyone, not you personally, So we were not in the habit of filing ARPs or petitions or grievances because we didn't like the way something, affected us personally. For instance, the strip searches. Everyone in solitary confinement, you were strip searched just because you left your cell and when you returned to your cell. There did not have to be a legitimate penological reason or security reason. That was the policy, that was the way it was, and that's how it had been accepted. So, we filed a petition of grievance, and we cited case law in which the court had said you can't strip search people at will in solitary confinement. You can strip search them, but only under certain conditions. And if those conditions don't exist, you can't strip search them. So we did a petition. We sent it to all the other tiers in solitary. They signed it. We sent it to the warden, and we asked them for a response within 2 weeks. So we never got a response. So after that 2 weeks, we start refusing to be strip searched. And as a result of it, we got gassed, we got beaten, we got thrown in the dungeon, and I got caught in kind of a damn if you do, damn if you don't situation, because at one time, the rule is if you're in the dungeon, you do 10 days and then you must come out for 24 days. But they never enforced it. So say if you had 15 days or 20 days, if you wanted, you could do the whole 20 days. So everybody, my whole tier, each one of us had 20 days. So everybody, did 20 days. I had 30 days. Everybody else had 20 days. So they did 20 days and got out. So after I did 20 days, they come to me and say, you got to leave. I'm like, well, I want to do the whole 30 days. And you can't do that. The policy said after 10 days, you got to come out. So they did that so they could force me to come out, go back to my tier, and then the next morning they would come to get me and put me back in the dungeon. But when they put me back, they would bring me in their office and order me to strip search. And I would refuse. So when I refused, 6, 7, 8 of them would jump me, and they would beat me up, and they would tear my clothes off, and they would pick me up and slam me on the desk in the office, and make all kind of racist and derogatory remarks, and forcefully spread my buttocks and stuff, and say all kind of, insulting things. And then they would bring me to the dungeon. They would, put the restraints back on me and bring me to the dungeon. And so that went on back and forth. So at the time, by the time we got this case in a court of law, I had approximately 300 and something days in the dungeon. So, but what happened is, the judge who went by the law after he read our petition, he ordered them to stop strip searching us, and the 300-something days I had, he ordered that removed from my record, all the write-ups and all of that. So that's how I didn't wind up doing 300-something days in the dungeon, And the dungeon is far more restricted than even solitary confinement, So that's how that played out, But again, we organized because we were able to communicate. Or they say necessity is the mother of invention. We were in solitary confinement. We were exposed to horrible, inhumane conditions, and we were struggling against it. So, we found ways to communicate. And then a lot of the artists that, served food or cleaned the tiers, they had a lot of respect for, what we were fighting for, because we knew whatever we won, they won, And so we were able to communicate with Harmon through letters. We developed a code system, and we were able to, someone on each tier knew that code, so we were able to successfully, communicate. And when the letters were found to be on safe, we would create new codes, and So that's how we organize in solitary confinement. And the resistance that we did in solitary confinement had influence in prison population. So when prisoners in population were treated inhumane, they would find some way to protest against it. So when Burl Cain said I was the most dangerous man alive, I don't think he meant physically. I think he meant, the fact that I still held on to the principles of the party, as he said it, teaching. I'm not going. He actually said to the press, if Woodfox and Wallace weren't guilty of killing Brent Miller, I still would not release them because I don't want them running around my prison teaching that Pantherism. So that's pretty much how, the last 44 years of my life existed. Constant struggle. The struggle was on two fronts. There was the internal struggle to maintain my sanity, to maintain values and principles that I had accepted that were the influence of my joining the Black Panther Party. And so, I survived. I not only survived, but I prospered as a human being. I am the very last thing that solitary confinement is designed to happen. As I can, when you spend years in solitary confinement, if you're lucky enough to get out, you either have a broken spirit or you are insane. And I happen to not be either, So.
There's a question over here, and then one over there, and then one over there.
Marwan Barghouti, he's a Palestinian political prisoner, recently said that our chains will be broken before they break us. Currently, there's 1,600 Palestinian political prisoners that are currently doing a hunger strike. They're on their 33rd day. One of the things that they're demanding or protesting is the end of solitary confinement, which is one of the major themes of your talk today. What is the best way to assist the Palestinian political prisoners, and can you share a word in support or whatever just about the whole situation right now?
Well, the most difficult and the most hard.
Albert, the microphone.
Oh, the most the most difficult and the most hard way of protest in prison are hunger strikes. But the real pressure must come from outside. It must come from the citizens. It must come from organization, community organization. It must come. They must make the voice of the prisoners. They, in effect, become the voice and the face of the old prisoners on hunger strike. So they must demand, not ask, not beg, not plead with. They must demand that the grievance of these prisoners, that the conditions, the inhumane conditions that would cause a man to starve himself to death, rather than submit to this kind of treatment, come to an end, and that humane policies be put in place. So while what the prisoners are doing is admirable, believe me, I know. I was on a 45-day hunger strike, and the closest I can compare to the men on the tier at the end of that was, you've all seen pictures of the death camps of Nazi Germany, and that's how we looked. Our bodies were basically we were feeding on our own flesh, and we only survived on water. And actually, the reason where we come to the compromise is because we were concerned that some of the other guys on the tier, everyone has a different level of stamina and whatever, and we were concerned that someone would die. And so they like had got to the point where every day they would send someone up on the tier, and they would like, is there any way we can, end this hunger strike? And we would say, cut the bars, and they were like, we're not cutting the bars, and we're not coming off the hunger strike. So once it got to that point, after 45 days, someone came on the tier, and he wanted to know, and so we like cut the bars, and they said, well, okay, we ready to cut the bars, but in the meantime, y'all have to eat under the door. And we like, no, we're not ever again eating under the door. We'll stand and we'll hold our hands, our tray in our hand, and we'll eat through the bars. And so they said, well, let me go talk to the warden and whatever. So they came back and said, we can't tell y'all how to eat. And we're like, what you mean you can't tell us how to eat? You told us just now we had to eat under the door, So it's like, well, I tell you what, if y'all want to hold y'all trays, if y'all want to stand at the bars and hold y'all trays and eat through the bars, you can eat like that, and we will come cut the bars. And of course, we didn't, we had no idea it would be 18 months later before they cut the bars, or start cutting the bars. So that's how, but in between those 18 months, as I said, the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Someone invented a sling, and then someone invented a shelf. So it got to the point where, they would set the tray on a little shelf on the outside, and, you eat through the balls with both hands instead of holding your tray in one hand, so. That's pretty much, how it went,
We have a question over here.
Thanks for sharing and being here. I'm wondering, in the late 80s, there was a political hip-hop that came out, and they were inspired a lot by what happened with the Black Panther Party and activism in the 60s and 70s. And I wonder if any of that sort of seeped in sometimes and maybe help keep spirits up through the prison system or any kind of...
Well, a strange thing, when Herman Robert, well, first of all, Robert wasn't even in the prison when Brent Miller was killed. He didn't come to Angola some 2 weeks later. But the fact that because he had joined the Black Panther Party and the fact that he knew us, they locked him in solitary confinement, where he remained for 29 years. He only was released from solitary confinement when he won his freedom in court. I don't be a little more specific. I'm not, I don't want to give you a false answer.
I'm thinking specifically of groups like Public Enemy, who were really inspired by Black Panthers, and if that seeped in at all to, because you mentioned sometimes you had a radio or something.
Yeah, good. Thanks for putting me back on track. When we were first put in, we were placed in CCR April 18th, 1972. And within a week's time, we all realized that for however long it was, of course we had no idea it would be decades for all three of us, that we could not allow ourselves to become institutionalized. That we had to turn to society, and whatever moral values or principles or whatever we developed had to be the influence of society and not the prison. So at an early, almost from the beginning, maybe because of our membership in the party and the influence of the party on us, we turned to society. So we were concerned with what was going on in society, not what was going on in prison. We use the term institutionalized, where guys only become concerned with what's going on in prison, the prison culture, who's this, who's that, what's doing this, or the gambling and using drugs and the strong arm and all of this kind of stuff. That we didn't allow it on the tiers that we lived on. We organized against it, but prisons are they are part of society. People that don't come from another planet and go to prison, they come from society. And because 99%, I mean, we know that there are exceptions to any rule, but 99% of the people that go to prison are economic hardships. They can't get jobs, and the instinct of survival is the strongest in the human species. So if I can't get a job, not just a job, but a job that pays me enough money, then I'm gonna find a way to survive. And usually that survival, so and from my point of view, when an economic system or a society exists that force people to commit crime or so-called crime, to me they are political victims. And you have political prisoners, people who go to prison because of their political beliefs and the things that they fight against. So I thought my responsibility or our responsibility was to show these guys that they were as much a victim as we were, because although they committed certain acts and came to prison, they had no choice. And so we had to get them to understand and show them the correlation between economic disenfranchisement to crime. And that, they were still human beings, and they still had a right to be treated with dignity and pride and self-respect. So the policies and regulations of the prison should be those that return them to society as productive individuals, as someone being able to rejoin society and contribute. But that's not the case. In America, when you leave prison, it's almost 99% out of 100 that you're coming back. And that is because of the laws of the prison industrial complex were able to get politicians to pass, because prisons are now economic zones in America. They are places in which the state and corporations create great profit, almost at no overhead. Like I say, the average salary in prisoners is 2 cents to maybe 15, 20%, depending on what kind of job you hold. So that was, some of the things we fought to teach the guys that lived around us. And, and there was a variety of other things. We developed schools, we taught people how to read and write. We taught people about history and geography. We tried to open up the world, because 90% of the guys who came to prison were functionally illiterate. They either couldn't read or write at all, or they could barely read, or they wasn't reading and writing on a level that they, should. And so, those were the type of things we fought, and we felt as though we had an obligation and responsibility to struggle against. So we started schools, and we taught guys how to read and write, or to read and write better. We taught them how to, mathematics, geography, history. And in turn, that pushed us, because in order to teach them, we had to know. So we had to teach. I mean, there were times when, we would hold class, and the guy didn't know that what I was teaching, I had only taught myself, the night before, so it was, but it helped me as an individual, and it helped them, everyone as a community, because that's the way, we looked at our tier as our community. And so, that's was some of the things that, I think helped me survive the madness called solitary confinement.
We have a question over here.
It's going to be the last question here because our time is out soon. Yeah, up. I mean, thank you. Oh, the question is over there. Thank you.
Where we at? Oh, okay.
Hi, my question is, what advice would you give to young Black activists trying to affect change today?
Excuse me?
What advice would you give to young Black activists trying to affect change today?
Struggle, social struggle. The only way to change things, individuals can cause chaos. Mass movements can cause change. So, for one, we have to stop looking at the color of each other's skin or ethnic heritage or physical features, and we have to start looking at the common enemy that we have. We live in a world in which profit, called venture capitalism, creates nothing but division based upon gender, based upon race, based upon class, and we are constantly fighting each other or against each other. We are making enemies of ourselves, so much to the point that we are forgetting why we are in the position we're in. And can you imagine how my outrage when Donald Trump was on TV campaigning about minimum wage? He's a billionaire. He's a direct cause of minimum wage in America. Just like billionaires around the world in other countries are the cause of the economic woes of their citizens. So what gives him the right or the experience to tell me about I should be satisfied with minimum wage, while he has built a fortune, billions of dollars, off of the exploitation of the working class of people of the world? So, hope that answers your question.
I'm sorry. I think I wasn't clear. There was one last one, and then it's over. I was like the two last ones. Thank you.
It pretty much goes along the lines of what she asked, but it was, what, in your opinion, are the steps that we should take to regain self-sufficiency in our community?
I'm sorry. Would you speak a little louder?
What steps do you think we should take to regain self-sufficiency in our community?
First you organize your community. You develop a concern for your neighbor, whether he lives next door or he lives down the street. So when he is suffering, the whole community suffers. And then you organize, you develop some form of relief in which, the community as a whole, there's an old African proverb that it takes a village as a child. Well, it also takes a village to protect everyone that's in that village, So, we have got to get, weed out of ourselves some way, this individual concept that, that is encouraged by economic institutions or governments. And you hear me always say economic first, because economics determines political systems, it determines judicial system, it determines social system, it determines the culture. So what kind of economic system you live under most likely determines everything that goes on in your country and in your society. But until these systems can be overthrown and replaced with something that is humane, you have to find ways to be creative, and you have to find a way to be a community. Not the individuals, but a community. And that's the only way I see. I think if you be concerned with what's going on with your neighbors, whether he's next door or, as I said, down the block, and you take the time to unite with other members in the community and come up with some solution that can help that person. That's the only way I see. There is no shortcut to social struggle. It is a must, and it will never go away. Even when somewhere, I don't think I'll be around, but at some point in time when humanity becomes a world community, there will still be need for struggle, if it's no more than the old against the new, so you can't see struggle as a momentary thing. You have to see social struggle as a lifestyle. You will be struggling for the rest of your life, either as an individual or as a member of your community, as a member of your society, as a member of your country, as a member of the world. You will struggle for the rest of your life.